The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Thursday, baby. It is Thursday. Tomorrow is Friday. And if you're working as hard as I am, I know you're living for the weekend. That thing has so much more meaning now when you get my age and you're working. Let's see, combined with the show, I think I'm probably doing 70, 80 hours. I don't know. I don't even count. To be honest with you, I don't count anymore, because if you count, then you might, start rethinking some things. And I really like everything that I do. So anyway, I don't know where that came from, other than the fact that, man, tomorrow's Friday and I get a chance to sleep. So let's have a good time on the show tonight. I want to talk about this narrative of everything this week seems to be about the white working class. A lot of conversations on mainstream media, particularly, I guess it's because of West Virginia, right? And there's really no clear-cut definition that I found of the white working class, other than the most consistent theme is people who are not white people, who are not college educated, who are generally poor, who now that's pretty standard across most definitions of the white working class. And then you have the extension of that, which is the assumption that they're generally racist, sexist, misogynist. Well, I guess that's the, some equivalencies there. Homophobic, overly religious. Basically, in many ways, they're seen as the scourge of America. And whatever. Yeah, we'll talk about them a little bit more. Particularly, I don't want to. I'm not going to. If you know anything about me, I do my very best not to just go with standard tropes. I don't want to go with just the general narrative that other people are pushing, because it does me and no good for me to regurgitate what everyone else is talking about. So in particular, I want to talk about the use of the white working class as a means of attacking the economic populist message. That's what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm also going to talk with Alex Law, a congressional candidate for the state of New Jersey. Alex Law, he'll be joining me at 9:30. We'll bring him in and have a conversation with him about his campaign and some happenings in his campaign. And we'll just talk in general about some policy issues. And of course, I want to get you in on the conversation. I'll probably open up the phone lines right about 9:15, so you could join the conversation. 857-600-0518 to join the conversation. And that's on your screen now. 857-600-0518. We'll start taking some calls right about 9:15 Eastern Standard Time. And then I have a category called Good News tonight. And I want to start incorporating some good news, just some stuff that's probably not going to be politics related, because it's going to be good news. I want to talk about this 15-year-old Canadian student who used the constellation patterns and Google Maps, along with satellite imagery from the Canadian Space Agency, along with historical locations of Mayan cities, to discover a 4,500-year-old, potentially discovered a lost city. So that's filing in the category of good news. It's an amazing story that I've been trying to get in all week long, and I have to talk about it tonight. But let me start with some low-hanging fruit. I want to talk about Hillary Clinton's emails yet again. But I want to talk about it from the perspective of Joe Biden floating out some information, really talking about what his presidency would have looked like. And then today in Politico and in The Hill, there was an article about Joe Biden talking about he would have picked Elizabeth Warren to be his VP pick. The reason I want to talk about that is because a lot of people feel that this is and when I say a lot of people, I want to say some liberal commentators feel like this is Joe Biden and the DNC floating Joe Biden as a possible substitute in case there is an indictment of Hillary Clinton. Now, what are the odds of her getting indicted? I don't know. I'm not putting any money on it, right? Contrary to what James Comey said, he said that there's no amount of privilege that anyone, no matter their position, there's no privilege. If they're under investigation, they'll get investigated like everyone else, and the results will be the results. That's what James Comey said in a political piece earlier this week. I personally don't buy into that. I think that the more someone is vested in a system, the higher up they are and the more dependent more people are on that person. I think that you will find that an investigation would slowly but surely disappear or take long enough to no longer be relevant. That's just my personal opinion. I don't have any anecdote. I don't have any data to back it up. I'm sure somebody has a research paper somewhere that probably confirms my biases. That's just my expectation. So I fully do not expect Hillary Clinton to be indicted, not because I think she's innocent, but simply because I don't think that they will let an email controversy bring her down. That's just my two cents. So if I had to bet money on it, I wouldn't think that she was going to be indicted simply because of those reasons. I do think some people are hell, we still haven't indicted anyone. No one has gone to jail over the crash of Wall Street, the Great Recession. So there are people, let's be real, there are people who are above the law. I think Hillary Clinton is, to a certain extent, above the law. Now, if I'm proven wrong, I've been proven wrong before. But here's the whole point. There are a lot of people who believe that this indictment or this investigation could potentially lead to an indictment because of the amount of feelers that Joe Biden has put out this week. I was watching a video and the Young Turks talked about it tonight. A couple of people, outlets are floating this idea that you see Joe Biden now back into the mainstream because the Democratic establishment is floating his name, putting out the feelers today with he and Elizabeth Warren as a means of prepping the population for the eventuality that Hillary Clinton would be indicted. Now, this is something that has been talked about. I haven't talked about it because, again, I think Hillary Clinton, to a certain extent, is going to be treated as though she's above the law. So I am not expecting an indictment, one. And then two, let's see what actually happens with the emails. Fine. Let's put that to the side. However, it makes total sense from a political perspective that if you have dug yourself into some shit, and with Hillary Clinton being under investigation, there is the possibility of some deep shit to come out of this. If you find yourself in that type of situation, then it only makes political sense for you to start putting those feelers out there for someone that you would rather support than Bernie Sanders. The DNC has shown itself to be completely against the economic populist message of Bernie Sanders. That is established. I mean, and that particular assertion really trickles over into the conversation about the white working class, right? There is, in my opinion, the Democratic Party has shifted and morphed into being the party of the economic elite. The Democratic Party has morphed into being the party of the economic elite, and not just the white economic elite, but the black economic elite and everyone else economic elite, the Democratic Party. Because if you are economically privileged, right, and you are not a social bigot, then where do you go? You don't go to the Republican Party because the Republican Party is stuck on stupid, and they may have the economic policies that someone who makes $1 million a year would prefer, but they don't want to align with an imbecilic party that is hell bent on taking us back to the 50s in terms of social issues, in terms of race issues, right? So they're not going to go to the Republican Party. And so over the last 30 years, there has been a transformation in the Democratic Party that has taken social issues that are progressive, and they've tried to merge it with economically conservative policies. And this is where we have things today. And the DNC is vested in that particular voting block. The DNC is vested in that voting block, and so they are doing everything they can to stifle the economic populist message of Bernie Sanders, which is why they would rather float the idea, in my opinion, if there is trouble on the horizon for Hillary Clinton, I would agree with some of the people who have covered this ad nauseum. This is my first time talking about it. It has been talked about plenty of times, but I would agree that the DNC would opt for Joe Biden with the conciliatory prize, the consolation prize. Well, conciliatory is also pretty accurate in this kind of conversation, but the consolation prize of Elizabeth Warren. So because all of this is in the air, right? This is what's going around the social webs and the interwebs rather, and the mainstream media. This seems to be the subtext of this week is that Joe Biden is now back in the conversation. And so we'll keep our eye on. I mean, that's really all we can do. James Comey came out this week, and it's just, I agree. Nothing is coincidental in politics. I don't believe that there's any statement that's ever released. If they're smart politicians, let me preface it with that. If you are a smart politician, then there is no statement that you ever release that is not intentional. And there is no reason for Joe Biden to be talking remotely about how good of a president he would have been or who the VP would have been if he had run, unless it is very intentional. So I think that is a pretty fair theory, for lack of a better word. But we'll see. It would be some very interesting times. Of course, I don't think a single Bernie Sanders supporter, or at least not a significant percentage, would take that lying down. I mean, to completely circumvent the voting process and to opt for a Joe Biden for the protection of the DNC and the establishment against an economic populist message, that would not play well for Democratic politics. I think that's a guaranteed way to split the party finally and have an independent run. Maybe that would in itself be enough for Bernie Sanders to really say enough is enough. I can no longer support the DNC. So it's all speculations at this point. However, I will say again, anytime you see messages like this being floated out there, it's nothing just happens. Every press release, every statement to a reporter and a journalist is intentional. And so whether or not Joe Biden's statement was intentionally trying to float his name back for the purposes that we're speculating, it does have a very specific purpose other than Joe Biden running his mouth. And now, with me saying that last sentence, it has dawned on me as I speak that Joe Biden is one of those politicians who does open his mouth and just says shit, right? So we have to calculate that in there too. So you know what? And this is a shame. Like, it might be a flip of a coin on this one. This could very well just be Joe Biden running his mouth, right? Because that's what Joe Biden does. And that's some of the reason I like him, is because he just says whatever the hell comes to his mind. But I still think it's just I think it's reasonable to make some of those speculations and to sit back and see how this plays out. All right. With that being said, I will I want to shift. And if you could join the conversation at this point, didn't realize that was a 15-minute little chat, 857-600-0510. 8518. This is a good a spot as any to thank you guys for all that you're doing, supporting the show. I want you to click like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you subscribe before you leave. We want you to get help us get to 10,000 subscribers before the end of June. I think we can get there before the end of May, but we're going to put the goal for the end of June. So I want you to join the conversation, 857-600-0518. While I shift gears really quickly and talk about the white working class, I want to connect the dots on that. But first, let's take this caller. Caller, you are live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, it's Bryce. What's going on?
Hey, Bryce, how's it going, my friend? What's on your mind?
Been busy working stuff, but yeah, the Joe Biden thing is it's just crazy because I was just young Turks and he was talking about it, and down the side, as we always talked about, they're so scared of Bernie that they're going to try to do whatever they take for him to leave the race or be screwed out of it, like Al Gore was.
Mm-hmm.
Like Al Gore was in 2000. And, you know, they did take Trump seriously, and here we are with Trump halfway there.
Yep.
And I don't know, it's just astonishing to see how it's just broken down. But what do you think will happen hypothetically if Hillary Clinton is indicted or if Hillary has to do some jail time or whatever? What do you think is going to happen with the party and the future of the DNC with the progressive movement that's pushing to bring the change it needs to bring? And I hand up to this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I think it's irrelevant. Honestly, I think the DNC has they have to pay the piper this time around. I really think they have to pay the piper. I don't think whether or not they can pull off a win in November without independence and without the white working class, all the people that they feel so encouraged to. I'm sorry, I guess shit is the word of the night tonight. The DNC feels encouraged to shit on the independent voters and then shit on the white working class voters. So if they can pull off a victory without those two demographics and voting blocks, I still think it's irrelevant to the price they have to pay with progressives and whether or not progressives hold to their guns and say that we are demanding that the Democratic Party either be progressive or we are removing ourselves from this party. I think they've benefited for a very long time by the progressive movement, and now it's at the point where it should be. I can't, we'll have to see the data, right? But we should be at a point where progressives are saying enough's enough. If what good does it do for us to align with you when your economic policies align with the Republican Party, with maybe 3 percentage point difference on particular tax top marginal tax rates. So I think it's going to be irrelevant to indifferent, whatever happens. But let's say that's thrown into the mix with Hillary Clinton. I think it's the same result. We're not going to change our mind about progressivism. We're not going to change our mind about economic populism. We're not going to change our mind about making policies that are going to be beneficial to the average American, whether Hillary Clinton is in office or whether or not she's been indicted. I think the email controversy has nothing to do with it. I think the bigger question is, what if they do that? What if they do go to Joe Biden and circumvent the voters on Bernie Sanders? Then I think you'll see that revolution away from the Democratic Party in mass at one time, right? I think that you would have a fracture in the Democratic Party at that moment, and whether or not it is a significant enough to give, let's say, the Green Party 5%, 10%, or if it's enough to cause them to lose to Trump. With the way the polls are looking, I don't even think it's going to take a split in the Democratic Party to cause for the Democratic Party to take an L. So it's we have to see what we have to see how it plays out. It's really a speculation at this point. But again, I have to emphasize, I don't think that you float these types of stories in the same week without there being some conversations, some necessary conversations going on. Because, here's the other thing. I don't think it will take an indictment. And I said this yesterday, and I need to drive this home. It will not take an official indictment from the FBI for the damage to be done. I think an official indictment from the FBI would be enough for Hillary to finally say, okay, I need to drop out, and for everyone else to say, Hillary, you need to drop out, right? But let's not even, you don't even have to go that far to think about the damage that the Republican Party would do in a general election against someone who is under a federal investigation, which she is. The damage will be done whether or not she's indicted or not. So let's just keep our eye on that story and see where it goes. Okay, I want to talk about, hell, and I only got 10 minutes. I only have 10 minutes to talk about the white working class. Maybe I should table that until after I get a chance to speak with Alex Law. And actually, let's do it like this. Let me just reach out to Alex Law now and have this conversation with Alex Law. That way we can spend some time on the white working class at the end of the segment. So I'm going to ring up Alex Law and bring him into the conversation so we could talk about a little bit about his campaign. We'll talk about some of the conversations. He has an article dealing with his opponent claiming to be endorsed by Bernie Sanders. So we'll discuss all that. Alex, hey, man, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. How's it going?
It's going well. I can't see you.
Yeah.
Are we on video or just audio?
No, we're on video, and you won't be able to see me, but the audience can see you now. And
Okay.
So thanks for joining me, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So listen, man, welcome to the show. I just want you to start off with all the things that I've been reading about you this week. But first, actually, I want to go all the way back to the beginning of the week and talk about your video with Now This, where you got a chance to share the story of your campaign, of which I'm a huge fan, right? I think this is your third or fourth time on the show, and every time I bring you on, I ask you to tell people about your strategy and how you're pulling this off. And Now This featured you specifically about your story. Tell us about that, how it came about, and some of the feedback that you've gotten from it.
Well, it's been amazing how many people all over the internet have supported our campaign, whether it's the wonderful community on Sanders for President on Reddit or Grassroots Select or Twitter or our Facebook page, facebook.com/AlexLawNJ. We have a lot of people talking about this campaign. Some days you can go to Facebook, you'll see 100,000 people talking about this campaign. Mm-hmm. So what that's led to, because of the amazing folks following this campaign, some opportunities to do some really exciting media. So the Now This video came about. My staff regularly is contacting various blogs and shows to get them on board to have me on the program. And they reached out to us actually and said, awesome. Hey, Alex, we'd love you to come on. So I said, absolutely, let's get it done. And we put that video together.
Awesome. So, yeah, and I think it's a great thing, right? It's a great thing because it exposed you to a very large audience, a much larger audience than a lot of candidates get a chance to be in front of. And it got the message out about this strategy, this ground game that you're running that actually is going to give you a competitive advantage. But in the midst of all this going on, your opponent in the race has asserted that he has been endorsed by Bernie Sanders. And in actuality, has he been endorsed by Bernie Sanders over you?
No, I mean, that's factually incorrect. I mean, Bernie Sanders, as we all know, we follow him closely, has endorsed exactly 3 congressional candidates, all of them women, none of them named Donald Norcross. And it's unfortunate that he has spent over $100,000 sending out mailers with that information on there. So a lot of the damage, unfortunately, has been done, but that's the kind of guy that Donald Norcross is, and we're pushing back against that. We have a big debate coming up on June 2nd, which we're very excited about. I'm sure this is a topic that will come up. I'm sure there's going to be some media coverage coming up about this. I wrote to the newspapers this week, as well as this pushback that we're doing online, getting a petition circulated so that we can get in front of Senator Sanders and have him formally say, no, I did not endorse Donald Norcross. I mean, look, Donald Norcross is the physical embodiment of everything that Bernie Sanders is running against in the Democratic Party.
Right.
He's someone that has voted with Republicans more than any Democrat in the state. He's taken over $10,000 from Donald Trump to fund his campaign. He's repeatedly worked with Republican Governor Chris Christie, and pretty much just is entirely run. Over 99% of his donations are from special interests or very large contributions. So this is the kind of guy that Donald Norcross is, and I can't imagine that Bernie Sanders would ever endorse him, and certainly has not to date.
Yeah, and I think this is a perfect time to have something like this backfire on him, because, like you said, we get this petition in front of Bernie Sanders, and then that would give him an opportunity, at a minimum, to look at your candidacy a little closer. But I find it ironic that someone who is so baked into the establishment like Donald Norcross would even want to assert that he gets the endorsement of an outsider like Bernie Sanders. How do you see that playing into his calculus, or is your district that amenable to Bernie Sanders' message?
No, it's not that. So it's not he's putting Bernie Sanders alone on his mailers. What he's doing is he's basically putting a button on all of his communications that says he's been endorsed by both Hillary Clinton, which he has, and Bernie Sanders, which he has not. And the reason for that, and by the way, he's changed all his messaging now to him being a progressive leader. Right. The reason for that is he spent right around $150,000 over the last 8 weeks on polling to try to figure out why my campaign is doing so well with so little money, because he can't comprehend that there's another way to be successful in politics without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. So what their polling is telling them is that we're doing well. People like our stance on campaign finance. People like the fact that we're embracing the progressive values that a lot of people here in this district support, whether they support Senator Sanders or Hillary Clinton. So they're trying to do this to sort of regain the kind of prestige that we've taken from them. Now, something that's interesting that has come out in this district over the last week, the record for vote by mail ballots in a primary in this district is right around 9,000. So far to date, there's already been 14,000 vote by mail sent in.
Wow.
So people are getting very excited about this election. And any time in this election when there's been a major deviation from the mean of previous performance, it's because of things that we've been doing. And we've prided ourselves on our excellent targeting of voters. So we believe we're going to have a really nice share of those 14,000 votes. Yeah,
that's awesome to hear, man. So I'm looking for, and I know you're in the middle of a campaign, and we want to focus on that. I see Grassroots Select is in the chat room. We want them to, if they will send the link to the petition to one of my producers, we can get it shared in the chat room and we can tweet it out. But I really want to talk about when the election is won. We want the congressman, you, to have some time to help us package up what you've done, because I think it's an inspiration. I've heard a lot of feedback about your video after I tweeted it, and people are just astonished at how much you've gotten done without the use of big donors. And then one message, they didn't tweet this, they sent this as a message, and they were like, imagine if that type of leveraging of money was done even with Bernie Sanders' campaign. It's like, if you take for $1, how far you stretched it, and we take something like that and magnify it, I think it's a game changer. Like, and I really believe that style of campaigning can really help us get money out of, at least big money, out of politics, and helps that movement. So just give me some more of your thoughts on that particular, on how that's coming for you and the type of feedback you're getting now that you've gotten that message out. And yeah, let's start there, and then I want a few more questions for you.
Yeah, of course. Well, so the first thing that I try to sort of instill in people is, as progressives, we feel a lot of, we're passionate that special interests are corrupting our democracy. But what I argue is that the tyranny of special interest is a very damaging thing for our democracy, but it is not the most damaging thing. The most damaging thing is the apathy of a citizen. And at the core of our success has been our ability to communicate that idea with folks
Yeah.
and make sure that they get out and actually give some of their time towards this campaign. Look, we've had almost 700 people say they're going to volunteer. That has turned into about 150 people actually coming out and volunteering, 10 full-time staff to volunteer. So we've been bringing that message to as many people as possible and inspiring folks to come out and actually do something about the democracy that they care so much about. So that is really where it starts. Of course, we have our plan and the things that we've learned about how to target voters, the best systems to make sure volunteers stay engaged, thinking about specific problems in a different way. So for example, I'm a big data guy, I care a lot about data, but if you want volunteers to keep coming out and keep knocking on doors for you, you can't make the process by which they engage voters very complicated. We had some folks come in from Bernie's campaign to talk to us about what we're doing, and they were astounded that we don't take down detailed notes about every door that we knocked on. And the reason that we don't is because it doesn't really matter. As long as we're having good engagements with really strong lit pieces, which we've put together, we need to keep talking to and engaging more people rather than sitting there and taking ridiculously detailed notes about every single person we've already talked to.
Right.
While that would be nice, the reality is it drives volunteers away because it makes the process much more like work and much less like fun, which it should be to engage your democracy. So the reason I tell that specific story is because we've been trying to think about roadblocks and think about different creative solutions around them, right? Okay, let's run for Congress. All right, so roadblock number one, money. Well, maybe there's a different way to do it. Let's think of a different way around that. And using that creative problem solving, that's how my team and I have been able to be so successful so far.
That's something I really love that story, man. I love what you're doing there in New Jersey. I only have one more question for you because the thing that keeps ringing in my mind is we need to validate this strategy by helping you win. What does what does your team need right now from our audience and any other audience? How can we help you win? Because we need this strategy to win. Yeah,
of course. Well, so look, it is crunch time. We're less than a month away from the election, which is on June 7th. So as I've said on your program before, anyone who wants to make phone calls for us, you can make phone calls for 5 minutes a week during the commercial of your favorite half-hour show. It will make a difference in this campaign. You can do that at callsforalex.com. We just put an improved script. We changed some things around. It's a little bit more user-friendly. I really do encourage you to go to callsforalex.com, sign up, make a few calls, make a difference in this race. Of course, if you don't have the time or you're not inclined to do something like that, you can, of course, contribute. And I've been hesitant in the past on your program and other programs to straight up ask people to contribute to our campaign because, like I've said, money is not the most important thing. But there's a few very important pieces of mail that I'd like to send out that we've taken some time to design so that they're going to have a huge impact with very, very targeted voters. And we need a few $1,000s to do that. Not $100,000, not $10,000, just a few $1,000s to send out that very last mailer right before the election. So if you're inclined to do that, I do encourage you to go to our website, alexlawforcongress.com, and contribute. Just so you know, we've had almost 3,000 people give to our campaign. The average contribution is $14.33.
Wow.
And that's something that we're very proud of, and something that we hope will continue. Lots of people supporting this campaign.
Alex, I want to keep doing an alley-oop with you, man. If you throw them up, I'll try to knock them out for you. Throw me some tweets. We'll send them out. We'll get some people over there to volunteer, to make some phone calls. And if they're so inclined to donate, we'll let them make that call. But I definitely want to support you because I like your attitude. I like what you're working on, and I like your motto. And we're going to package that up after you're in Congress. I'm gonna drive down to D.C. I'm going to fly down to D.C. and I'm coming to your office so that we can talk about packaging this up for us to model this for this next generation of millennial progressive congressmen and congresswomen. So Alex, thanks so much. AlexLawForCongress.com. What's your Twitter handle?
AlexLawNJ and Facebook.com/AlexLawNJ, the best place to get daily updates about the campaign.
Awesome, man. Listen, you're welcome back on the show anytime. One of these days, we will talk about policy. I never want to talk about policy with you, honestly, because I think what you're doing is very important because it's something that needs to happen because most people would engage in their democracy from a candidate side if they didn't feel like they needed to raise $1 million. So thanks for what you're doing, man. And as soon as I can have you back, I would love to have you back.
Absolute pleasure, as always. Looking forward to the next appearance.
Awesome. 857-600-0518 is the phone number to join the conversation. I want to know, what do you think about Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, them floating that news out? And I also want to know, what do you think about Alex Law? I'm a fan of Alex Law. I bring him on as often as I can, and as often as he asks, I actually bring him on because I want to see more people run for office that are passionate and still have vision. Because I think we have a lot of not Manchurian candidates. I think we have a lot of people who are jaded, who've been in this so long that they no longer go into office with vision. They no longer go into office with passion, and they become just a block on the wall, like just something that's there, not making any actual change, but just occupying space. And when I hear passionate people like Alex Law, Alex Singer, Christy Matthews, Corey Bush, all of these people that we've had the pleasure of bringing on the show, I'm excited. Lucy Flores. I'm surprised I'm remembering all these names, to be honest with you. When we have people like that come on the show, I'm really motivated to see that there are actually people who are passionate and are willing to throw their name out there to engage in the battle for our democracy. So, all of that being said, 857-600-0518. Let's talk about the white working class, because that's the narrative that has been the prevailing narrative of the week. If you listen closely, there's always a theme for the week, right? And that theme has been circulating around the white working class. It's something that everyone talks about on the news right now, and it's really only the narrative of the week because of West Virginia. And it's like this assumption that because West Virginia does have a historical reputation of poor white people, and so I guess they're just that's the reason for the conversation. But I've been quiet on it all this week because I've just been sitting on it and trying to unpack in my mind what they're trying to do with this narrative. Because I want you to be sure this narrative is being pushed. Or a narrative is being pushed by the Democratic establishment about the white working class, particularly one that they want to part ways completely with the white working class. Now, Hillary Clinton is, of course, never going to say this, but her actions actually communicate this, as well as her surrogates and her minions and her legion. They communicate this, and there's this open, blatant conversation now that's happening from white liberal elites and from black liberal elites that is completely and wholly dismissive of the white working class. Now, as I started to talk about before we talked to Alex, there's not really a true definition of the white working class, except for one consistent theme, which is they're uneducated, or at least they're not college educated. They're generally in poverty or at the very bottom economically of the middle class. And then there's some generalizations that are made about them, that they're all racist, that they're X, Y, and Z. The thing is that the white working class is overwhelmingly voting Republican. And so one of the things that I've seen is that there has been a game being played, which is always the case, trying to tie the reputation of racism in the white working class in the Republican Party with the economic populist message of Bernie Sanders, and a complete rejection of the economic populism that would fix the plight of poor white people, but would simultaneously fix the plight of poor black people and poor Latinos and poor Asian people, because there's more poor people in America than just the white working class. But there has been this holistic, this all around casual dismissal of economic populism, because it's seen as a remedy to a problem that only exists in the white working class, as though poverty is only something experienced by the white working class. Never mind, 28% of African Americans are living in poverty. And so there's this equivalency that's being drawn between poor white people, the white working class, and and the economic message of Bernie Sanders, particularly on the intersection of racism. And so there's always a conversation that we have to have on every given day of the damn week of whether or not the issues that African Americans face are the product of racism, or is it the product of class? Like is what not only African Americans, but what we face in America, what's the biggest problem in America? Is it race or is it class? And you have an entire group, and this is a big elephant that I bit off of, but hell, I left myself 30 minutes to talk about it, and we'll talk about it, and I want to get your input. But there is something that I think people are missing all the way around. There's at least like three things I think people are missing. Number one, there are plenty of African Americans who are economically privileged, who are economically elite, that would never vote with the Republican Party because the Republican Party has fully bought into the racist narrative, the racist tropes, straight out racism, right? But they are conservative, to be sure. They are definitely conservative in their social ideologies, but they're just not able to go to the Republican Party because the Republican Party is straight out racist, right? So when we have this conversation about we're surprised at how black people could vote for Hillary Clinton, particularly from an economic perspective, I think it's short-sighted because there are plenty of well-to-do African Americans who are voting for their best interests economically with Hillary Clinton. The problem isn't that black people are voting for Hillary Clinton and they are voting against their best economic interests. It's the same exact paradigm that economically elite white liberals looking down on the white working class, that you have a lot of economically elite black people who don't care anything, or they don't care enough about black people in poverty to actually move and have an economic populism message. They don't care so much about what poverty does to their community, to their cousin's community, or to their nephew's community, or whoever they have. They don't care enough about that to actually change the economic paradigm underneath which they are benefiting. So I want people to the first thing we got to fix is this idea that every black person that's supporting Hillary Clinton is voting against their economic best interest. No, that's not true. They're making a whole lot more money than a lot of people in my audience, and a lot of people that support Bernie Sanders. And that's actually broken down by Nate Silver in the 538 blog, where he discusses the share of voters voting with Hillary Clinton that are doing well. And matter of fact, no, stop. I got to stop there. I'm not going to go there because there's this, actually, I guess I am going here. The mythology of poor white people being the ones lifting Donald Trump up. I'm pulling this directly from Nate Silver in the 538 blog, showing that Donald Trump supporters are not those poor white racists that everyone is trying to build this week's narrative around, right? That Donald Trump's supporters are actually more well-to-do than Bernie Sanders supporters and more well-to-do than Hillary Clinton supporters. But that's a free one. I have to unpack that another day. But the main point I'm trying to drive home right here is that liberals, white elite liberals, have this condescending gaze towards white working class people. To some extent, there is I can't say the word justification, but there's some understanding behind it. However, because the understanding that could be behind it is the fact that there was an entire segment of white working class people who defected from the Democratic Party somewhere around 1964, 1965, with the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, respectively. They defected from the Democratic Party to go to the Republican Party. And ever since then, the Democratic Party has been distancing themselves not only from white working class people, but from labor unions and that entire blue collar segment of the voting electorate. Right. So the Democratic Party has been completely moving further and further and further away, to the point where now we're at the point where there are openly people with large followings, people with outlets, with Salon, with this huge article, basically dismissing the entirety of the white working class as people who should not be concerned, we should not be concerned with, but rather we should shame. And from the conversation of the racism that exists in the white working class, right? From that perspective, I probably could somewhat agree with it. I really don't care too much about people who are voting against their own economic best interest because of their racist bigotry and hatred. I don't really care, other than my general humanist care for humanity. You know, other than that, I don't give a damn about them. What I care about is how this particular trope is being manipulated to push back against an economic populist message that would benefit the average American. And I'm sorry if I don't care if white working class racists will benefit from economic policies that would benefit the poor black people as well. I'm sorry. I am not going to not support a democratic socialist message because that's going to benefit people who don't like black people, or it's going to benefit people who messed up the labor unions in the 60s, and it's going to benefit the white working class poor bigot trope that they're trying to push. Because that's essentially what's going on. Right now, we're dealing with the conversation of it's because of the white working class that economic populism fell apart. So then, therefore, it is an attempt to, anyone talking about economic populism is an attempt to put economic populism above racism in terms of a problem in America. And that trope has been beat to damn death in this election. When the reality of it is, I guarantee you, if you poll any African American about what the number one problem they face in America today, number two would be racism. Number one would be money, paying the rent, paying child care, having enough money to pay for medicine and food, having enough money to try to send their kids to college, even though they may not have gone to college, having enough money to actually get out of the hood. Right. So there is an economic problem that people, African Americans, face every single day. And the game that's being played is, oh, the white working class, they would benefit from economic populism, but they're racist. So we don't even need to talk about that at all. Let's talk about their racism. That is the game that's being played. That's how we're being manipulated. And that's how this entire primary season has played out. And it's at the point now where the Democratic Party is saying that they're not interested. They don't even want to talk about the economic plight of the average American anymore. They just want to talk about race, even though what we face on an everyday basis is going to be more economically challenging than it would be race. I'm sorry. Somebody, Pew Research, go and do the interviews, go and do the polls, because with 28% of African Americans living in poverty, the bottom line is we have to have an economic revolution in the United States of America. And if you don't want to, let me paint the picture a little better. And I want to get your opinion on it. You have people who are Ivy Leaguers who make 6 and 7 figures a year, who are looking down on people who probably struggle to get $30,000 a year, telling them they need to check their white privilege, creating the conversation to make it sound as though they're sound as though they're intersectional and that they're anti-racist. But all the results, the only thing that comes out of this entire conversation is the delay in the economic revolution that would benefit African Americans disproportionately. And yes, it will actually help some racist white people too. And ultimately, they want to shut down the conversation about this economic revolution because of their disdain for the white working class. Now, I don't care. Like, again, let me reiterate, there was an entire swath that left the Democratic Party, that left the labor unions in the 60s, that left because they were dissatisfied and upset with the fact that there was a tremendous amount of integration taking place. And you could see the trends with the labor unions in the 60s where there were more people aligned with unions who flipped and began voting Republican right around 1964 because of the Voting Rights Act, right? So there was a betrayal of the progressive movement of labor unions by people who did not want integration and they felt left out. But damn it, that was 1964, and they went to the Republican Party. And so why are we basing Democratic, and I'm blowing this mouth out, why are we basing Democratic economic policies based on something that happened in the 60s on a group of people who are no longer even in the Democratic Party? Why are we still sitting around? Why are we catering to this fear of white working class racists when you already believe, I mean, and the polls bear it out. 62% of the white working class went for Romney in 2012. 36% went for Obama. So we're already at the point where the supermajority of white working class people went to the Republican Party and have been there. And so now we're just twiddling our thumbs, and more than twiddling our thumbs, what we're doing is we're using the language of race and intersectionality, and we're using it to suppress an economic populist message. And it has come full circle this week with the entire conversation about how Bernie Sanders won the white working class vote in West Virginia, and how because he won that, there are people who are going to allow their racism to make them unable or incapable of even supporting socialism, because you saw what happened in the 60s when they saw benefits going to African Americans. They said, oh, we don't want it. And so they flipped and went to the. Did you see that? It's so convoluted, right? So this is the argument. The argument is Bernie Sanders won the white working class in West Virginia. They must all be racist because in 1964, they were all racist. And so because in 1964, they're all racist, then today they must all be racist. And therefore, they're voting for Bernie Sanders on the basis of socialism, on democratic socialism. And they won't even support that because once they realize that democratic socialism is going to help black people, too, then all of a sudden they're going to back away from it because they're racist. Because, they're racist because in 1964, they were racist. This is actually the conversations that are going around in the Democratic establishment circles. These are the articles that are being written. This is the mindset that is being sown into the brains of the Democratic base and the Democratic elite. And so what does it actually produce? It produces an environment where anyone who talks about economic populism is automatically assumed to be some type of microaggressive racist because they're talking about economic populism instead of racism. And economic populism is going to overwhelmingly benefit, or not overwhelmingly, but economic populism is going to benefit these racist white poor people, as if the only poor people in America are white and racist. I probably needed a chart and a diagram to go through all that. Because when you sit and think about the absurdity of what's actually being asserted, you realize it is a twisted web of intentional propaganda for the purposes of undermining an economic revolution. Why? Because they are the economic elite now. Liberals are economically elite. The Democratic establishment are economically elite, and they have simply decided that they are more interested in they're more interested in maintaining what they have than doing anything to reshape this broken paradigm that keeps 28% of African Americans in poverty and an even greater percent of Americans, black and white, living paycheck to paycheck. They are more interested in the safety and security of what they have and what they know than they are in changing a broken system. And so this is just one of the tools, man. This is one of the tools. And so there's this entire this second narrative that's going on that they don't even need white people. You know, they don't need the white working class. They don't need them because we don't want them because they're all racist, and we don't need them because the Obama coalition is coming into the rescue. Never mind that 30% of the population right now, and actually I think it's much more than that, right? You have over 40% of the voting population right now is white working class. It's not here's the biggest takeaway for me. It's not that I'm sorry, the phone lines are open. I'm missing quite a few here. 857-66 857 I forgot my number that quick. 857-600-0518. You can join the conversation. It's not as though a damn thing that they're saying is going to fix racism. This is the biggest red herring ever perpetrated, in my opinion, on America. This idea that we should hold off on discussing economic issues because we need to fix race issues first. And it's not as though a single person who is asserting this has ever forwarded a policy that is remotely capable of changing or fixing systematic racism. Not a thing. But instead, all they've done is use racism as a means of keeping white working class people poor and African Americans poor. So we're in this poverty game together, right? We are in this we are, while they're playing this game on us, you have poor black people and poor and to be sure, I don't know what you guys make. To be sure, I'm not in poverty, right? Obviously, I'm not in poverty, right? I haven't been in poverty in a long time, right? I would love to not be spending a mortgage on childcare. If I didn't have to spend a mortgage on childcare, I'd be living it up, right? But that's my plight. But at a certain point, when you experience it firsthand, and when you see other people experience poverty, and you see what it does to their entire hopes of a successful, even a modestly successful future. You see how poverty rips that away from them. You see how poverty rips education away from them. You see how poverty rips their dreams from them and their opportunities from them. It doesn't matter how much you make now. You look back and say, we've got to fix it for somebody else. And you have a group of people who believe that. And then you have another group who has made it out. And instead of looking back and saying, we've got to do something to fix it, they look back and say, you disgusting white working class people, we should shame you into the closets and the dredges of society. Simultaneously passing programs that exacerbates their reality. Right. Yes, some of them are racist right now today. And I got a picture up of this guy who loves Donald Trump, build the wall. Right. He's the thing that comes to the mind of elites when they think of he's the person, rather, that comes to mind of elites when they talk about the white working class. Right. Never mind that something like the TPP is going to exacerbate the reality of people who depend on factory jobs, whatever factory jobs are even left in America. Never mind that you have people who live and work in horrid conditions that most of us would never spend a day in. Never mind that they are living in a reality that is almost like a third world country. Never mind that they're seeing their life expectancy go down. And I'm talking not only about, with the exception of the life expectancy, I'm not just talking about the white working class. I'm talking about everyone. This is not something that is problematic just for white people. This is the thing that drives me crazy, is that we act like poverty is just a white problem in America. And that's because the people, the black people that they put on television for you probably are 2 generations, if not 3 generations removed from poverty. And so they are completely forgetting about the plight of their cousins who are still living in poverty, or their second cousin twice removed, right? Who is still living in poverty. And so they look with disdain on the white working class because they're uneducated and because they're poor, but somehow they're blind to the uneducated, poor black people. This is the other thing that I want to say, and I'm gonna get out of here because I'm trying this new thing, coming to the studio with public transportation with the train, right? And I gotta catch this train. I gotta catch an Uber to a train. A lot of people, a lot of black. I want to talk to black folks real quick. If you think that these white Ivy League bourgeois white people who look down on poor white people with this disgusting gaze, which makes them hate them, right? It is a visceral hatred that is fomenting to the top of liberal elites, particularly economic elites. If you think that hatred is too far removed from your ass, then you are sadly mistaken, because it's not possible for you to have this type of condescension towards any human being and it not be just one figure. You might drop yourself down from 6 figures to 5 figures, and you'll fall into that same category of people that they look down on. And so while you feel as though you're in the club and you're with these people you think are anti-racist because they hate the white working class, you are just one wardrobe change away from them locking doors on you as you pass by. You are one wardrobe change away from them, progressive and liberal alike, standing their ground, pulling a gun on you. You are only one wardrobe change and one figure of salary away from being looked down upon by that same exact group of people. So I don't get encouraged by this new movement of this new condescension that disdain. That's the word I'm looking for. This disdain that is being expressed towards poor white people. Not 1 second, because I know underneath this hatred for poor white people is really a hatred for poverty in the first place. It's a hatred for people who they feel are beneath them. And maybe hatred is too strong of a word. Maybe you don't like that word. Maybe that's too much, but it's really a disdain. It's a disdain for people because they will look at you. They will look at a white person and blame them and say, you just made bad decisions. You need to, and I'm not even talking about Republicans. I'm talking about Democrats. You can hear Democrats right now today blame you for not making the right decisions, blame you for not getting the right education, blame you because you didn't go and become a lawyer from an Ivy League institution, blame you for not doing all the things and telling you to pull your pants up and get your life together. These are Democrats who are blaming your economic plight completely on the decisions you made. Whereas there was a time when we as Democrats realized that this economic paradigm actually has a lot to do with how people are born and where they're born and the state that they find themselves in at the end of their life. If you're born in poverty, you're that much more likely to die in poverty. That is the result of our economic paradigm. And there was a time when Democrats understood we needed to do something about that. We needed to do something about that fundamental flaw. And it pisses me off to no end that we have allowed white liberals to co-opt the language of racism and intersectionality as a means of undermining the very message that would benefit 28% of African Americans that are still living in poverty. Congratulations, all of you who made it. Congratulations. Matter of fact, pat myself on the back. I ain't doing too bad for myself. Me and my wife, we do okay. Congratulations to everyone who made it. But do you realize, no, wrong statement. not do you realize, but I realize that there's some of us who are still looking back and realizing we have to do something to fix this broken system so that other people can make it. And then you have the rest of them who are saying, I can't stand those poor white people. And those people are one statement away from saying, I can't stand those poor black people. All right. I'm going to call an Uber. Y'all send me my check, Uber. No, I'm joking. It's Friday, and I got some stuff to do. I'll holler at you guys later.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support the Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to
hold on, YouTube.
www.patreon.com/the
Yeah.
BPD Show and support the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Man, I still did not talk about this good news. All right, stay where you are. I got to talk about the good news. Hang on, how do I get my camera back on me? Boom. All right. True story. This is the last story of the day. Hell, whatever. All right, so it's a great story, and I want to open up my notes so I don't forget anything. Coming out of Quebec, Canada. This is just something, let's end on some happy news, right? So the 15-year-old boy, let me pull up his image on the screen, right? Let's get this white working class dude off my screen. There we go. And actually, I want you to see him too. There you go. All right. So 15-year-old may have discovered what could be the ruins of a lost 4,500-year-old Mayan city. His name is William Gadary. He's a 10th grader, and he wanted to research how the Mayans chose where they would build their cities. And the reason he wanted to research that, this is a big switch, right? The reason he wanted to research that was because he realized the Mayans were very effective at building cities, but they didn't always build cities in practical places. And so he wanted to see if there was any pattern to how they built their cities. And so what he did was, and I'll pull his picture back on the screen, what he did was he came up with a theory that the Mayans used constellations to determine where to build their cities. And so he studied 22 Mayan constellations and found that when he overlaid them on a map, they matched 117 Mayan cities. But he also noticed that there was a 23rd constellation that was incomplete. And so this is a 15-year-old. He made this theory, and he came up with a theory that matched 117 cities, right? Matched in alignment with constellations. And so he took the constellations, or he took satellite imagery along with the Mayan constellations. He overlaid it, and he discovered that on 22 of constellations, it identified where the Mayans built their city. Now, this is a theory, and it really draws a lot of conclusions about the ability of the Mayans to not only their constellation savviness and expertise, but their ability to even land surveying and to find these exact locations. So it makes a lot of huge conclusions about the capacity of the Mayans to operate in this manner. However, you can't negate the fact that 117 cities align with the Mayan constellations. And he discovered that there was a 23rd, there's an incomplete constellation. And so he drew the conclusion that there must be a city where this constellation was incomplete. And so what he did was he reached out to the Canadian Space Agency and requested permission for access to satellite imagery. He used Google Satellite and Google Maps. And what he discovered is what I'm going to pull up on your screen now. He discovered what the CSA, the Canadian Space Agency, believes could very well be a lost city. The reason, and you're looking at an image of on one side, it is the Canadian satellite imagery, and the other side is Google imagery, and you see this figure, this square shape in the exact location that the constellation predicted a Mayan city would be. Now, the Canadian Space Agency agrees that there is a high likelihood that this is something that was man-made versus something that is just appearing in nature because of the shape. If you look at the shape of it, you see that it has a very symmetric square. It is a square. Right. And so they said that you rarely find figures like this occurring naturally in the universe, in space. It's this shape on Earth. Right. You rarely ever find something like this. And so their expectation is that this is very likely a Mayan city. And this is in Mexico. Right. The satellite imagery is, of course, in Mexico. So 15-year-old boy speculating on why the Mayans built their cities where they built them, because where they built them was not always practical, even though their ability to build was phenomenal. Some of the places they built were hard to reach, were not accessible by water, just were not practical. And so he made the conclusion that there has to be some science to their reason to building, right? And so he came up with the idea that the constellations would dictate where the cities were built. And so far, he was able to account for 117 of the known Mayan cities. And where he predicted a fourth one would be, it overlaps with what satellite imagery believes will be or is leading him, along with the Canadian Space Agency, to believe is some type of man-made structure that could quite possibly be in a long-lost Mayan city. That falls underneath my category of good news. That was worth me stopping the show and coming back and telling you about it. I want you to read more about it. And his name again is William Gattery, a 15-year-old from Canada, doing some amazing stuff. That's something to have a good weekend on, folks. All right, now, officially and for real, I'm gone. See you guys on Monday.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.